Hello, everybody. My name is Chris, and today we're doing something a little bit special. We have a documentary to watch. The Making of Prey. The Prey 2017. Now, this is a video that I've kept basically on the side for quite a while. Ever since, actually, we started playing Prey. We played Prey 2017, and during that, this ended up being recommended on YouTube. And I set it aside. I was like, we'll come back, right? Potentially. And then I really enjoyed Prey. Like it was amazing. And then we just recently finished Moon Crash, and overall it's one of those games that sucks to leave behind. Not that we're never it's like it we can always go back and play it. But it's the concept that we've completed it, and it's not really a lot. I mean, nothing else is really happening to it, and Arcane Austin is no longer with us. RIP. Right? But I thought this would be cool. This would be fun to check it out, right? It's like the making of, and it's on the noclip channel. I'll include the link to this video in the description in case you guys want to go check it out. Give it a like, check it out, right? See it for yourselves. But I love Prey. I didn't realize I would, and then I ended up really falling into it. So this is gonna be fun. So buckle up. Here we go.
Looks like we have some tests to run through today. Probably not the kind of thing you're used to, I imagine, but trust me, you're going to do fantastic.
I think the nugget of the idea was more like Arx Fatalis. Instead of a level-based, mission-based game, it's a contained, big structure like a dungeon or a spaceship or one big-ass building or a city. Just like one space that was not completely linear in the way Dishonored is, right? In terms of like the mission sequence. Eventually we hit on let's do the science fiction version of this on a space station. And so Raph started working on a pitch where one of the chief conceits that he wanted to do was the whole mind games thing. You can't trust exactly what you see. And so he had a very detailed initial pitch of that, the first 10 minutes of Prey. Things kind of snowballed from there.
So good. Mind-blowing.
If you're watching this, chances are you're one of two types of people. Either you're somebody who enjoyed Prey and can't wait to learn how Arcane designed this complex, elegant, immersive simulation, or, no judgment, you're one of the many people who didn't play it. Prey is a tough game to talk about without spoiling. This is why we released a separate video about the game's intro last year, to make sure that this video is as spoiler-free as possible. Because guess what? Prey is one of the best games most people haven't played. We're going to cover a lot in this video: level design, enemy design, bug testing, dynamic storytelling, and much more. So let's ease into this by asking some very simple questions. How did a studio behind so many fantasy games end up in sci-fi? And why in God's name did they call it Prey? A game most people associated with a mid-2000s first-person shooter, and a sequel that famously never saw the light of day.
That's wild.
So back in the days when Dishonored was finished, I was starting to think about what I would like to do next. I had a couple of different ideas, and all of these ideas would somehow be in the same genre, the same thing that, the immersive sims that we've always liked so much. Immersive sim is more than a genre, it's more like a set of values, or if you think about it. It's almost like there's a continuum. It's almost like there's a landscape of, you can pull some sliders, like how much of an RPG is it versus how much of a, direct action game is it. And if you look at Dishonored, and it's great sandboxes, very, very deep in the systems, etc. But really it's focused on one mission after the next. And this time we wanted this contiguous, big one world, one mission in a way, where, with all the side missions inside. So it would be like if you take one level of Dishonored, but make it to the size of the entire game. And then you can go back and to places that you've been before, and then the context has changed. And if you leave an object on the floor and come back at the end of the game, it's still there. Or maybe a creature has taken it or something. So we wanted this really this one contiguous world where the player would be in an environment and kind of against the environment, surviving against the environment. So very System Shock kind of thing.
Our blueprint or our model going into it was, something like System Shock or like Arx Fatalis, which Arcane had worked on before.
Never played System Shock. Definitely heard about it. I know there's System Shock 2, but that is, yeah, it is, right? The entire space station is, everything happens on it in all the areas, and even though there's the major areas have like loading screens between them, the fact that there is so much permanence across all of those areas, like when you leave the glue, it stays where it is, right? There are some things where you leave objects, you clear an area, you come back later, there could be mimics there could be other enemies there that weren't before, right? You don't know, and you never know. It's fascinating. And it's this place where you go to places, you go to certain areas, and then you have to go back through those areas or back to those areas for either story reasons, plot reasons, exploration reasons, supply reasons, or just to get through it to get to another place. Or you got new abilities that you can use to, access other parts of that area you couldn't before, and it it is so good. I could talk about it forever, but then this video would end up being like 7 hours long. But anyway, I love that was actually their thinking.
So we knew it was going to be a big physical space that's self-contained and carved up into different subsections, right? And that there was going to be a very strong element of non-linearity in terms of like where I can go and when I can go there.
We had these sort of inspirational posters of the different tenets of the project, and Space Dungeon was one of those, right? Very much inspired by Arx Fatalis, just the giant contiguous space. Also by like Metroidvanias and things like that, where the whole thing is this interconnected sort of
pretty sick
mass of levels.
That being said, there is a structure to the main story, right? There's a progression. So like, it's not like once you got out of the labs that you could just go anywhere you wanted. There was like a gradual widening of the possibilities, which is Metroidvania-like, right?
And none of these ideas were somehow something that Bethesda wanted, but they wanted us to work on the Prey IP, which that's how everything started. And eventually we agreed on something like, as long as I can do almost like a different IP, but with the same, the fact that it's on a space station with aliens, etc. I guess that was the compromise, because anything else was not negotiable. That game had to be Prey somehow.
Was there
That's
a name
crazy.
associated with this project prior to Prey?
No, it was like a secret code name. Like I think it was Project Danielle, which was like a little bit of an homage to Shodan. Right. But it was just, it was our science fiction trapped in a big space station, Arcane style game pitch.
And Bethesda's like, you're gonna call it Prey.
The Bethesda group was like, we have this name Prey, can you please use it?
It's a pretty good name.
Yeah, I mean, it is a good name if if it didn't have a lot of the background lore and history attached to it. Like, if in a vacuum, it's like, that is a badass name for a game.
It is.
And in a vacuum, it totally applies to the stuff that we were working on.
Was there any pressure to bend the knee to any of that, to acknowledge it or none?
That part, thankfully, was not part of the discussion at all. Right. It was largely about we should leverage this name because it's a really great name for a game, and we have the rights to it.
That's correct. That's so weird. First off, agree. That's a badass name. It's really cool, right? But the fact that there were 2 games prior that were Prey, and there's a reason why people who had suggested us to play it were like, Prey 2017. Play Prey 2017. Why? Because there's the other games called Prey. They have nothing to do with each other. But this is Prey. And then finding out Bethesda's just like, just use the name, please. Can you please use this name? Like, well, we could come up with a new name. No, well, we already own this one. Can you please just use it? It's like, okay, well, do we have to make it relevant in the story? Do we have to make Prey a thing? No, it's just the name. That's all we care about. That's so weird. But it also tracks how I feel how I imagine some of these companies with property names would utilize it. Just use it, right? We can market it.
At first, I had an idea for a different type of environment. It was not meant to be on a space station or anything like that. And given the corporate mandates in that situation where we had to do that, we ended up accepting to take that name. But it was not necessarily what the best choice we wanted back then. And it worked out. We made the game we wanted with a name that we did not necessarily want back then. And it's the second time it happened to us as Arcane. We had the same problem with Dark Messiah of Might and Magic, which is the first thing that I brought up in that meeting. I said, look, been there before. We were making that game back in the days that was some sort of a first-person medieval fantasy game that was meant to be a new IP. And what happened? Ubisoft look at it and say, fantastic, make it Might and Magic.
Stop! No, why? This is so dumb. That's crazy. I love that he actually brings it up too. He's like, we've done this shit before, guys. He's like, we're trying to make a new IP. Okay. And then fucking Ubisoft. Just like, yeah, but what if it wasn't new? What if we just tied it into this thing we already have? Oh my god. That's so silly. Oh my god. Because like it works for this, right? Prey, and you thinking, oh, you're the prey, and then they even included in some of the details you can read about like the mimics and everything and how they function, right? They spoilers. If this is already spoilers enough, you've already been spoiled about a ton of stuff in this game, right? But if you haven't, spoil it anyway. So what? You've been warned. The fact that the way that the mimics work by switching going into like a parallel dimension with an object and they like switch places, like that process, and then it talks about that in the game, and then it switches back instinctively automatically when something nearby that object triggers it. And they even use the word, they're like prey, like something that the mimic wants to prey on gets near that object, that's what happens. So it worked having the name Prey. It just didn't work in the greater context of what Prey is in the past. But this is goofy. This is silly. Fucking
what happened? Ubisoft look at it and say, fantastic, make it Might and Magic. And you're a small developer, you don't have it's so hard to get deals. You just go like, well, are you sure? It doesn't sound great. I mean, and that's exactly what happened. Like the people who are big hardcore fans of Might and Magic shat on us because it was like not the game they wanted. And the people who hate Might and Magic and would have loved our game, like, did not even look at our game.
Criminal. It's insane. I'm sorry. I'm trying not to pause it so much, but that's got to be crazy, right? Because the idea is you're building as a new IP. It has no connection. I don't know a lot about Might and Magic, right? But I assume if you do know about Might and Magic a lot, and this game comes out from Ubisoft called Might and Magic, right? Or part of Might and Magic as a franchise, you have an expectation. And they didn't make the game as a Might and Magic game. So as a fan of Might and Magic, you're like, this kind of sucks. This ain't it, right? And the people who don't care for Might and Magic, like you said, will just ignore the game because they're like, oh, I don't like Might and Magic. And so they just got completely screwed over because they were forced to use this name. Man, I hate that for them.
We were like, this is the game we want to make. It's Arx Fatalis like, it's System Shock like, and the name fits if you want us to use the name,
The beauty of Prey is that it really is a singular piece of art. The game has a consistent ecology that makes it very difficult to talk about one part of it without falling down a bunch of rabbit holes. So we'll get to enemies and guns and powers in a little while, but to first introduce you to this world, let's start with Talos 1, the space station that Prey is set in. a creation that even required a specialized role within the design team, something that Arcane referred to as the level architects.
That's cool. Okay, this is exactly why I cannot talk about this game in very small details. Can't do it because, like you said, all the rabbit holes and just talk about everything like weapons, environments, enemies, like the lore, the pieces, set pieces, the way it's all that. And I'm glad I'm not the only one that thinks that way. But anyway, they had to get a special role.
There's the whole like narrative flow, like what's the story gonna be? There's the like the world building, like like the space station itself, and then there's the like the mission design. Like what am I, how many sections is the space station carved up into, and like what am I doing in each space? What's my goal there? Blah blah blah. Designing all of that kind of happens simultaneously. And it's super organic, right? So like over here in the like narrative thing, we'll like come up with something that's super important, which then, way over here on the mission side needs to warp and bend to serve, or vice versa. Like, man, Anthony came up with a really kick-ass idea for his mission, but it means that we need to warp the story over here to serve that, or there's a world building thing about the space station that's true now, and that needs to inform the other two legs. And so we've got narrative people involved, creative direction, level designers, the architects, bringing their world design sensibilities.
One of the unique aspects, it seems to be, on this project is the architect.
The level architect.
Yeah, could you, I guess, speak to the role of the architect and how that is different to, say, an artist or an art?
Sure. All of the architects, on Prey, I was the lead level architect. So all of the architects come from an environment background. So it's really a level artist, but where at a lot of studios, the level artist creates all of the final props. The level architects work very closely with the level designers, and the level designers are the ones that are requesting these spaces. I need an office, I need, an executive suite for Morgan, all these things. The architect does a really high fidelity gray box. Some level designers do gray boxes, but the architects take those and make them make sense. The word architect is actually pretty key to this title, because you want it to be grounded in reality, to be believable, add some of those humanizing elements. So if somebody really worked here, what is their experience with this space? But then also injecting the beauty. It is an art role, so it kind of straddles the line between marrying level designers with the environment.
That's so cool.
We stay in grayscale for a long time so that you can iterate, push and pull, bust a maintenance panel through here. Let's widen this for the nightmare. Can't get through here. So then by the time it does go to the environment team, they feel really confident about what they're making. They then deliver back to the architects the final assets, and then the architects do the world building, the environmental storytelling, the lighting, all that kind of stuff.
So
That's
I think each
fascinating.
level designer works a bit differently with their architect. I tend to tell my architect, hey, these are the uses that I want for these spaces, and these are the kinds of things that I want the geometry to house. And then I kind of let them go and then assess, you check. Like I would talk to Rich and say, how do you feel about this space? I'm thinking about doing this in this space, and then fine tune it from there, It's so collaborative. So for example, if the entry to this space, the player comes in looking at a wall and the door out is back behind you, I would say to the architect, hey, can we have, line of sight so that the exit is across the room and it's well lit? And the architect might build something that I didn't anticipate, but it's really cool, and so you find a use for it. I remember when I first started working on fan missions, I would put a trigger volume in a doorway, thinking that, well, when the player passes through here, this will happen. What we do instead is we simulate a reality where it doesn't matter how you arrive at the vase, right? It's when you arrive at the vase and pick it up, then this happens.
Opening up your objective structures can be liberating for the player, and they can choose what order to do things and things like that, but it's also easier for you as a level designer. When you remove constraints of like, you have to do this, then this, instead of it's like, if you do all three of these things, then you have succeeded. So if you can decouple things like that, you can make your life easier, the player's life easier.
Exactly. That was one of the coolest things about this game, was the absolute like sandboxy freedom nature of accomplishing so many things. It was get to your office, How do you do that? It doesn't matter. Whatever you got to do to get there, just get there, right? It's not like, oh, like, yeah, like a singular path, like you have to go here, then here, then here in this exact order. If you try to go this way, oh, those doors are suddenly locked. They were unlocked earlier, but they're locked now because you have to go down this specific hallway to get to this, stairwell that goes up to the office. Instead, you could enter your office in so many ways. I ended up entering it through the maintenance wall behind the looking glass, and I broke through it into our office. Absolutely phenomenal. Right? That was one of the later ways of entering the office. Right? The initial way, you go up normally. But then you explore more and you start learning there's so many ways to get to different areas in the station. And I love that was just a vision. It didn't just happen to be, it happened to work out like that. They were genuinely like, this works out for both us as level designers, works out for the players, that freedom, right? And we don't have to design a bunch of constraints. And it feels better, and it feels good, and you feel free to do it, right? You feel in control, right? Instead of you being handheld or like led in a specific way to do everything. It's phenomenal.
We also have a lot of writers themselves in the level design team. So I can think of Anthony Huso, for example, who was one of the level designers, not only of Dishonored, but of Prey as well, or Steve Powers is a writer as well. They all have some sort of Dungeon and Dragon, Dungeon Master type of mind. The way we would implement the story that is associated to one level, for example, would come, mostly from Ricardo and I as far as like the parameters that we define. But then what happens inside was really developed by the level designers themselves.
We had certain sections of the station that were assigned to us, but then we would also, if a mission started in your map, then you also scripted the end of it wherever it ended.
Mm-hmm. Right. We have different sub-layers and things like that for any given level. So this might be their space, but then Anthony might want to have his objective end in someone else's level and say, hey, can I carve out a space over here? Can you give me a utility closet or a crawl space or a room or whatever that this is going to end at? And then he would take over that chunk of the level.
Oh, interesting.
So I had the lobby, which was one of the earliest parts of the game where Morgan's office was located. There were a lot of complexities with the office and the NPCs that would show up there and the presentation in the looking glass.
The elevator.
Yes, right. I had the elevator.
That's like a real elevator, right?
It is a real elevator.
Which aren't very common in games.
No, for a reason.
Yeah, there was definitely an elevator that was a challenge. It went from being an elevator to being an elevator with a combat experience in it, and trying to combine that with a lot of complex physics and some insane player powers made it, it was a challenge. It definitely involved some trickery. There was some tricks that had to be used in there in order to pull it off, some creative teleportation. And you always end up with the same kinds of problems of, now you have a moving player on top of another moving object, and what happens when it wants to move? The platform wants to move at a certain speed and gravity wants to shove something through it, or it moves out from underneath you too quickly and you don't want the player to fall. So you end up in this weird situation of trying to glue things to elevators so that physics doesn't go crazy.
Yeah, so we have to make the player invincible. Then we have to take away their weapons so they can't like stick glue to things because everything's moving. We can't let them drop stuff in the elevator. We can't have people kited into the elevator and do combat except for the ambush, things like that.
So these things tend to sort of metastasize in a way. At first it's just an elevator, and then it's like, oh, well, we should have an ambush on there. And the foundation for the thing is not, you never envisioned that it being used in that way, right? So you have to rethink, okay, how do I make this work now? Or do I have to scrap this and redo it from the beginning? The ambush, specifically, where you have that fight, it's not in the elevator.
It's a fake elevator.
It's a fake second elevator. So when we do the power flickers, we're teleporting you into a fake elevator. That's where your combat takes place. And then once that thing is dead, once the Phantom's dead, We send you back to the other elevator and start it back up.
These sons of bitches. That's genius. That's amazing. Holy shit. That's so cool. This is the mind of a great designer when you see this. The fact that the elevator was that complicated, I guess you don't really think about it, right? As just like a player, you know, like an average person, like you wouldn't think like, oh, how do you make this object move? But then you have a moving object inside another object that has the player being able to freely move, right? And you obviously could set up collisions so they don't fall through it, but then like the speed and the actual movement of the elevator is real. And, oh my god, that's so cool. They do the flicker, we get sent to a different elevator, right? An elevator room, have the fight, flickers back to the normal elevator. Genius. And it's seamless. It is seamless. That ambush scared the shit out of me when it happened. But man, that's so cool. That's such a cool detail.
But yeah, that elevator was, for the 30 seconds, I think it's like 6 to 8 months of work and some self-imposed crunch time.
Brother, what? Holy hell. Oh my god, it was worth it. That's so true. But, oh my god, 6 to 8 months just on the elevator, just on that scene. This is what, man, this shows just how much, I have no idea how long and how much work actually goes into, like, designing a bunch of this stuff. Like, I try to, right? So I take this in and I absorb it, and I remember this is fascinating. But 6 months to 8 months. And he chose to crunch out some of it because he wanted to get it done. That's crazy. For just the elevator sequence and the ambush. Half a year of your time is being spent working on this. Every day. 5 days a week. And crunch. Like a
we
warrior.
really wanted to get the look of Talos and this opulent and illogical skyscraper in space to really feel amazing. So we spent a lot of time on the lobby at the beginning and trying to find that mixture of the Soviet era architecture and sort of the like, what if Google built a space station with all the money? You know,
it's so
what
good.
would it be?
We kind of delved back in time to Kennedy and the space race, but he was not assassinated. So we kind of went with the art style of that time period and kind of spun up Neo-Deco. So then applying that to the station, there were kind of 4 locations. There was the executive, where a lot of that Neo-Deco came in, the rich, you know, it's like the public facing. There was the engineering, which was a little bit grittier. There were the labs. And then there was the exterior itself, which of course was a huge undertaking. So those were like the 4, there were kind of architectural sets built for each of those areas. And then you would bring in some of those elements, like in the labs, the directors had, you know, the leather couches and some of those rich elements. But so it was kind of a blending of all of those 4 across the station.
God, the exterior is crazy.
Stuff, it was the warm woods, the rich leathers, things like that. The labs get a little bit more sterile. There was some color striping that was added to designate different areas, just so you didn't feel like you were seeing the same thing over and over again. There was actually colors designated to the different characters. Like if you're a security guard, security was blue. I think engineers were brown. Scientists, I think, were like a blue-green. And like Morgan is red, right? So that was executive. When you think about any level, there are some signature rooms to it. So for power plant, it was the reactor room, right? You know, for lobby, you could think Morgan's office is pretty important, but you pick that signature room, and instead of trying to dive in and do the whole zone and like out the gate, you take that signature room and you actually set up a camera, and you really just focus on that initial shot. You know, so you're not really too worried about what's behind you, and it's really trying to do some explorations on what that could look like, and maybe even do a couple, and then, you know, working with art direction and level design, picking the one that is kind of hitting that vibe that we want to capture. Then you could potentially do another research of another room, and you do that before you even start to stitch it together and do the entirety of the level.
I love this so much. This is incredible. This was a phenomenal. I'm so glad that this was put together because this is so cool. The aesthetic, right? I agree. Phenomenal. Right, the leathers, the gold, the inlays, the wood, everything. It makes it so iconic. And it looks really nice. Like the executive areas look and feel genuinely really high class, right, compared to some of the other areas. That's so interesting. Their process and how they worked at that.
Thinking about the whole level all to like can be overwhelming. So taking that slice in and focusing on a key location, it's like what you want the player to feel and what you want this reveal to be, kind of gives the artist that freedom to really explore and go for it. Part of it was the functionality of it, like what do you need to run a station, the life support, all that kind of stuff. But then the other side was pushing the corporate side, like there's making billions of dollars off of Neuromod, so they've got to be flashy. They're bringing in celebrities to do the scanning, to get those skills that they can then sell to the public. So it was balancing those two things. So first off, it was trying to think a little bit on the side of authenticity of what a space station needs to run and how much are they shipping up to space to build this thing, versus also having to have that flashy presentation that they're giving to all the celebrities, the investors, all that kind of stuff.
It's such a good way to think about it. Cause yeah, they got like bullshit money. They got crazy money. How much they're making. Yeah, like she said, like they're bringing celebrities up here. They're doing tours. It's like this whole thing. Investors, and so you got all these areas that look incredibly nice because they can and they would. They just spend so much money, let alone the money it would take to bring everything up here. And I do appreciate so much attention to detail going into obviously the aesthetic of, you know, the what is it, the public facing sides, that's the way to say it, being very high end, very nice, very clean, very fancy, and the lobby looks amazing, right? But the fact that they took into account like, oh, what would they need to run a station like this, like, you know, be able to get supplies up here, how much would it be, would, you know, having to have realistic areas for the storage of those, and just what supplies would you need for, you know, life support, like oxygen, would you having them in like every room, you know, obviously, like, you know, that you can extrapolate beyond that, and I love it.
You want authenticity, but you also want a humanizing element. So the authenticity being like, well, if this is the kitchen, obviously they need, or if it's the cafeteria, they need a kitchen, they need a dishwasher, they need a cold storage, all that kind of stuff. But then, you know, one nice place to do a lot of that storytelling was in the cabins, the crew cabins. So who works there, and knowing the story behind their day-to-day life. So of course, you know, Dr. Calvino is doing tests in his lab, but then you go into Abigail's room, and she and Danielle have been sitting there playing video games, you know. So it's just knowing the characters and being able to add that layer of personality, but picking the key assets. So again, it doesn't get too cluttered. So you get to tell the story, and those things get to shine because it's not overdressed.
God, so good.
I'm trying to avoid using markers, like, you know, turn the markers off and see if it still works, because those can be a crutch. And we didn't really breadcrumb the markers any, so it wasn't like something like Bioshock where you've got like an arrow that you're just like following to get from point A to point B. You actually have to kind of figure it out.
Yes, you do. And sometimes that got tricky, but in the best way, because it made you think. It made you remember some of the areas you went through. It made you process, like, okay, I got to go through, you know, oh, we got to get back to the cargo bay. How did I get to the cargo bay before? I could go outside the station to get there, or I could go through this area to get there. Oh, I need to go to a recycler. Like, is there one on the way to the cargo bay? Maybe could we pass through another area, right? Stuff like that. And yeah, the HUD was incredibly minimal. It was very big fan of that, right? And there wasn't a ton of like markers on the screen. There's like the main objective one that you had like active, right? And it would show up, but it wasn't, like an eyesore. It wasn't, yeah, like this, like you said, like a giant arrow. You're kind of just like autopiloting towards, you know.
I think the thing that I like most about, I mean, all Arcane games, but Prey in particular, is how like lived in the space feels. It feels like a real place. It's not this corridor that was built for me to shoot things in. It is, a space that all the characters have names. Like you find somebody and they have a name, and that was actually thought out and planned out by the level designers and level architects. And
it's so
I think
good.
That's really cool.
And to add to that, maybe the scale of the environment, like the entire space station being to scale and being able to go outside and explore from the top to the bottom and see all of the different levels. And I think that's something that didn't need to happen, but they did because just the attention of detail that was put into Prey.
It is absurd.
Exterior. That guy went through a lot of iterations before I even started. I think it's the size of 8 football fields, right? And you can fly around the whole thing. Originally, I think the size was pretty large from the start, but all of the areas were pretty condensed, to starting to space those out so that they felt meaningful and gave you that space to traverse. There was a lot of work done up until the end as you got far away, the detail pieces would fade out and a simplified asset would turn on to get that balance so that you don't see that happen. To a certain degree, the exterior is pretty close to the interior, but for the savvy player, Hardware Labs actually takes like a 45-degree angle, but the station is actually, it's like straight up with hardware and SimLabs. It looks like a T, right, like a cross, but actually Hardware Labs in the interior itself cuts off at a 45.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll forgive you.
We opted not to do that to the exterior. So.
But eventually that all gets mushed together, and it's messy. It's not a clean process. But that is like a quick summary of how it goes. But
how do you communicate to players the possibility space without like overburdening them with things to do?
I don't know that we succeeded in doing that. I kind of feel like Prey probably was overwhelming for a lot of people. The more space you devote to tutorializing, that's less space that's left to like the sandbox part of the game. You know what I mean? And so ideally you want like tutorializing and playing to happen at the same time in like a very seamless way, and that's what we try to do.
There were points where it did feel a little overwhelming. Mostly because like the amount of freedom you have, the amount of space, the amount of try to be like, okay, do I go for the objective? Do I explore more? Am I exploring too much? Right? Am I going to explore too far? Right? But then, okay, if you go to an area, here's your objective, but then the amount to go through for that, to get from here to there, is, in certain moments, it did feel overwhelmed, but not in a way that made me want to stop, right? It was more like, okay, no, we just focus on what do we want to do? What do we want to do? Or what do we need to do?
In this case, it's a lot of tuning, a lot of looking at your testers play the game and adapting, trying to identify when they're confused. So yeah, you always have the main objective, something that the players can connect with at a primal level, like where they go, okay, that makes total sense. I gotta escape this place, or I gotta find my brother because he told me come over. I'm in trouble, or whatever it is. And then you have those little breadcrumbs of additional content that are linked to the lore or might foreshadow something that's going to happen later. Either way, that makes the entire thing feel cohesive. And that's just a lot of work of designing an environment from a world architect standpoint. You just create your world, and all your designers are involved, your level designers, and as they know the full story, and as you work with each of them independently, then they go deeper into detail and they start putting notes on the computers that reflect some of the policies that the space station has or something, and that actually is linked to somehow site content, etc., etc. And that's how you go like layer by layer. You're really painting that huge frame, that huge painting, one detail at a time until it brings this like cohesive magic world.
So exceptional.
That was a phantom. Typhon Antrophantasmus. Keep moving.
First couple of levels you go to in sequence, and you introduce mechanics and narrative and stuff like that. But eventually you start to get more and more access to different parts of the station. And eventually, towards the latter half of the game, you can go anywhere in the space station anytime you want. We had a linear mission structure, but with some built-in parts that you could do in any order, right? And so that's kind of what our goal was initially, was to have a series of missions, but then occasionally you can branch, but then it folds back together. But then layered on top of that, like the space station is also opening up more and more. And then of course, then you throw in on top of that all the like NPC stuff and side missions and just random, player-driven goals. Some stuff we try to be very overt about. There's some critical choices in the game where like, your brother Alex is saying you should do this, and January is saying you should do this instead. So that's a very overt choice, right? But then there are some things that we are not overt about, but feel like natural consequences. At one point this commander comes aboard the space station and starts trying to kill everyone and kill you, and he's telling you, I'm gonna do X, Y, and Z, and you can ignore him. And we actually wanted that to have teeth, right? It's like, if you just ignore what he's doing, then he will kill Alex. Alex will just die, and like that is, and we telegraph it, but we're not super overt about it in the same way as like Alex in January offering you these mission outcomes or possibilities. We like play out scenarios, even sometimes probably too much, but like you can end up in the Arboretum and see Alex already dead.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Like, I know he could be taken out at like, at that point of the story, right? At the end. But him coming for I didn't have this happen, right? We definitely stopped him, and we ended up, removing his neuromods and everything. But that's so cool. The idea, if you actually don't do it, you can come across Alex and he's dead. I feel like I feel like I need to see that, right? It sounds actually kind of sound fucked up to say it like that, but you know what I mean. Mostly because like he's got these items, the cherished family photo, and everything, and we never saw these. That's so interesting. But I wonder what that photo is. I've never seen that photo because he never died in my playthrough when we played it, right? But yeah, I love they do that when he comes aboard. All this stuff is happening in real time around. And yeah, with like the January and Alex stuff, it's like, hey, yeah, like for January specifically, right? It's like, do these things. And it's like, okay, we got to do these things. These things have to be done. We're going to do these. Whereas this being kind of an optional thing, you feel like you need to do it. You feel like, well, we got to do this. We got to stop this. But they don't put it in your face and say, go stop this. You got to stop this. Go.
Or Alex not dead, but the Commander Doll like arriving, or you can show up and Commander Doll is like about to execute Alex and you can watch it happen. We don't bury that, but we just like, we don't billboard it either, It's just like, this is a natural consequence of the things that we have set in motion, and we're gonna let it play out. And all our level designers love to do that shit.
You could actually see, that's nuts. That's crazy. This is actually playing out in real time.
We don't billboard it either, It's just like,
that's this. We're almost halfway through this, right? But it hurts to know that this game did not succeed in the way it needed to. The amount of fucking love and care and God,
It's like, this is a natural consequence to that shit.
At the end, it feels like all makes sense. But then when you do something like I did December, then you also need to go back to the very beginning. Okay, so let's go back. Like, what happened before the game starts? Well, what happened was that you would back yourself up, etc., and then more than once now. So now you have to change the backstory and make sure that it's consistent across an entire game. So as you advance into the making more and more progress into the development of the game, let's say now you've been working on this game for like 2 years, making those changes become more and more painful because now you have to go all the way back and and look at all the ramifications what it means, and some of them might be in the systems even.
One of the ones I think is early in the game, if I'm remembering correctly, is when December contacts you.
Yes.
Yeah, what was the conflict you were trying to create there? Was it to sow distrust in January?
Part of it is to support the narrative about, like, there's more than one Morgan. Morgan's personality has drifted. That's one of the themes that gets explored, right? Like, the test that you take at the beginning of the game is very much inspired by the Factor 5. Like, there's a lot of different personality tests, like Myers-Briggs and the Enneagram and stuff like that. But, like, the one that's, as far as I can tell based on my research, the one that, like, most, psychologists are like, this one actually has a little bit of scientific rigor behind it, is like the big five, right? Sometimes people call it ocean. So the questions in that test are inspired by that kind of thing, and it's what they're trying to figure out is Morgan's personality drifting across resets of his memory, or is it staying the same? They're asking him the trolley problem to see if he gives different answers. But some of the other questions, like, where would you like to take a vacation? Somewhere new, somewhere familiar, right? That's testing, like, his openness to new experience. But it's all because they're trying to figure out, is Morgan's personality drifting?
Ooh, that's heavy stuff.
I fucking love how much was put into that. Because, like, obviously, like, you find out later, right? He's done this multiple times. They've reset his brain so many times. He's been reset, right? And so they do these tests, and it does make sense to be like, oh, they're trying to make sure if his answers are the same, right? But it's more than just like, is he picking the same answers? Is he feeling the same, right? But the fact that they went and actually made this based off of ocean, because it's the most, it would fit, right? It would fit, but it's also the most accurate, or not accurate, right? Like, it's got the most scientific evidence for, like, success and actually, like, proving to be effective, right? And they chose that. They chose to base it off of that, which I just think it's cool. What a good idea. They could have just made it a lot simpler and not really put that much work into trying to go, okay, should it be based on some like real psychology test, or we just kind of make it more simple? They made it, like, believable and actually rooted in something. So it's kind of interesting because you, as the player, going through, and initially, before you know anything, it feels like it's testing you, right? These are your answers, how you feel. You're answering for yourself, right? Which in turn is, this version of Morgan is you, which is different than the other Morgans. And so everybody's choices are different for this test. And it just plays into it. It's so interesting because you don't know that you're Morgan, but you know that you're Morgan. You don't know that you're, everything that they've been doing with Morgan. Man.
The more you go, then you're steering this big machine, hoping that it still makes sense. And one of the big questions that people have is, why don't you have the story ready at the beginning and just map the game on it, and it's just going to be, why do you go through all this pain of changing things all the time? And I think some of it is because interactive narration is not like static narration. It's not like a movie. A lot of the pace you don't control. It's controlled by the player, by what the player understands. How is that fun? So the story is not an afterthought, but it's something that has to be constantly reevaluated. Is it too long? Have we lost the player at this point? Like, is the player still thinking about like the overall motif, or is the player lost into like why they're doing the thing they're doing right now? So it's a very, very iterative process, and which can be very distressing to business people who are trying to guide us and wait for the game to come out, like not understanding why this thing is so hard to make. After all, you've already done it 10 times. What is the problem?
That's so good. That's such a good point. I'm sorry to pause again. I promise this will be quicker. But yeah, the fact that they have to think like, okay, is it taking too long? Is the story taking too long? Because there are some games that you hit point in the story, and you're like 15, 20 hours. You're like, all right, oh shit, this is happening, and then there'll be like a pivot in the plot, and then it changes, and it's like, oh, here's another 20 hours afterwards, and in some ways you can be like, oh, that's great, more game. But if the pacing was like good at that point where you reach the turn, feels like, okay, we're good, right? Then it goes beyond that, and then it's like, oh, okay, we'll keep going. And then, is it too drawn out? Are you kind of dragging the plot now? Are you even still thinking of the stuff, yeah, that is relevant on a technical level, plot wise, from the first 6 hours of the game? Are you thinking about it 20 hours in? Is it still relevant, or because there's so much else going on, or things have been drawn out too long, you forget it, and then now you're designing set pieces and plot and story that are just not really remembered, that should be connected to this other thing. And yeah, the line, right? The people that are like, why is this so hard to make? Come on, you've already done this, just do it again. Like, what's the issue? But I love that he brings it up, right? Player's still thinking about the overall motive. Is the player lost into it, right? Constantly being reevaluated, because yeah, the pacing is pretty much is completely controlled by us as the player going through this, right? Because things can happen as quickly or as slowly as we actually do things, right? Because the faster you get to certain areas to progress the story, the faster the story progresses, right? But if you spend a ton of time getting wrapped up in exploring certain areas and then side objectives, and if that all takes so long, getting back to the main story, it could, maybe it feels like too much, right? But I just think it's cool that these guys really thought about
like
all
the
that
overall motif, or
and took it into
lost into
consideration
like why
when
they're doing the thing they're doing right now.
did these things.
So it's a very, very iterative process. Business planning. Why this?
Prey is a game where every system has a lot of depth beneath the surface. The way enemies behave, the way guns work, the layout of the station. There's always something new to learn. This is perhaps one of the reasons why the game can be divisive. There are folks who love the complexity of the simulation and enjoy replaying the game in new and interesting ways, while other players became overwhelmed by all of the systems and had to put it down. This complexity means that we have a lot of fun things to talk to the studio about, but in our conversations it became clear that the team recognized that this wasn't to everyone's liking.
There's lots of things I could critique about Prey, but I think probably we should have been a little more aggressive in cutting some features from the game so that it was a little, so we could go deeper on the things that we, fewer things. Game length is a weird thing because you've got one camp of people that are like, I want a game that says it's got 2,000 hours of gameplay. Right. But then on the other hand, I'm over here like, okay, I don't want to be done with this game in 3 hours. It's an RPG. I want to mess around. I want to have a cool story and a big world to explore. But I'm also 43 and I've got 5 kids and like I want to finish the game. You know what I mean? I don't want it to last 300 hours. Like,
exactly.
I totally want to be done with it and then go play something else.
There's a middle ground.
I think we probably had too many player powers. I think we went bananas with that. I think we could have narrowed that a little bit more. And I'm okay, and we're okay as a studio with like, not every player has to see every ounce of content in the game, but there is a little bit of a like threshold of a bang for buck there where like, well, we made like 90 powers and the way you played the game, you only saw 3 of them. That's kind of a shame, you know what I mean? Maybe if we had a smaller set of powers, you would have seen more.
There is a lot of abilities. There's a lot of abilities. Not just in like the powers, like the Typhon powers, which is there's a lot there too, but in like your base abilities. And then the way you build out certain things and the combos of those. Because there were some abilities that we didn't see, right? I didn't spec into leverage very far, so I couldn't do a lot of the heavy objects, which, if we did, would allow us to utilize the environment items as weapons, right? Especially the heavier objects, throwing them. Been really cool, right? So I totally I get the thinking, and I can see both sides, right? A lot of you guys are really into the game, especially multiple playthroughs, different builds, different power sets every single time. It's great, it's fun, it's awesome. But if you're just like a casual player who's like really enjoying the game, but you go through it like once, you know, you may only select like a handful of abilities, and then you don't really see the others, and in a way it could feel like, oh, I missed out, right? Oh, did I not? Should I have spent more time hunting for neuromods and stuff like that so I could have gotten more powers? But then I didn't really need the powers because I still finished the game. And so having so many abilities, right? If it cut them in half, right? Then they could develop those abilities like maybe even more, right? Or like double down on maybe more weapons or other stuff, right? But then if you have too many weapons, does that fall in the same category? Probably, right? But
one of the constraints or one of the values that we bit off was like the players' powers come from, because of our fiction, they come from the aliens. So anything we come up with for an alien has to translate to, and it doesn't have to be one-to-one, but there has to be a version of it that the player could possibly utilize as well. It was cool, but it was a big pain in the ass too, because you could just brainstorm like, oh, wouldn't this be a cool power? But then we're like, yeah, but then the player gets a version of that, so what does that look like, And sometimes that was badass, but sometimes that was like, we nixed something because it wasn't feasible or was out of scope, Our goal from the beginning was definitely to have an ecology, like an interconnected ecology, right? So that they weren't just random monsters waiting in closets for you, but like that there was a reason why they existed, and there's like a chart you can look at and see like, okay, this one descends from this one does this one for this one, That was what we started with, and then of course on top of that it's just like, okay, well, what's actually fun? What's fun to fight, what's fun to shoot at, what's fun to be scared of.
Hell yeah.
And so probably like the
Made
Mimic,
sense.
of course, is the most signature creature in the game, and that was super fun to develop. Initially, the Mimic was actually the bipedal human like phantom. I think Raph pitched an idea around like a creature that could like, disguise itself or whatever.
Bro.
And then in talking, we were like, well, let's make it not bespoke or like scripted. Let's make it so that it's actually systemic. We have a bunch of physics objects in the game. Why not just let the creature decide what it wants to mimic and put some rules around, how often and what its range is and stuff like that. But then we were like, guys, this means the player can do that too. Like the player could turn into a cup and roll around on the ground, and we were like, ah! And so that was like a major freak out, especially on the tech side. They were like, the player's gonna turn into a pen and fall through the floor, and because all that's like super legit concerns.
Mimics were like amazing QA testers, because the Mimics would find all sorts of things that we didn't want them to turn into, and would break all sorts of things all the time because they would turn into stuff they weren't supposed to. They made it incredibly difficult to ever record gameplay footage of the game. When we would need to put things together for like QuakeCon or whatever, Mimics would do whatever. They were just there. They'd do whatever they felt like doing. And so you'd be trying to record something, and a Mimic would do something really cool, and then something else would get messed up in the shot. And then Raph would see the footage and be like, that was amazing, do that again. And we're like, the Mimic did it. I can't, I don't know how to make it do that again. It doesn't want to.
That's so crazy. Oh my God. So they made them, they programmed, they set them up that way, and then they're just letting them function the way that they were programmed to. And it's so just authentic and just like raw that it is quite literally unscripted. And there's no way to actually script it exactly the way that it would do what it does. That's fascinating. And the philosophy of, if the aliens can do it, we can do it. Right? So everything, because our powers come from them. So if they were able to do something and we couldn't do it, it would be like, but there's like a weird disconnect there. And I love that they actually thought of that. And so that's why we can do all like that's why we can do all the fire powers and the electricity, and we can do, the dashing around, and obviously mimicking, turning into the objects, and just so it's cool.
With mimics, since they were some of the smaller ones, they were the friendly AI. but one consideration would be having to make sure there are enough physics objects for them to transform into.
It was interesting because we had to account for all of the assets that it could mimic into. So as a player, being able to use that power, and also the NPCs, like being able to mimic something that they saw in the environment.
We had to put all these rules and constraints around it so that it could be feasible. That has knock-on effects, right? That means, guess what? Our team, there's no pens in the world, or if there are, they're locked down. But we typically don't lock things down. So then that means everything that's a physics object has to be from this size to this size.
In a traditional game, if this table was, say, lower to the ground, we wouldn't have to texture to the underside of the table if there was no way the player could ever get underneath the table. But by creating a game where a player could get very small, we created far more work for the art team because we had to make sure that it looked good when you rolled yourself underneath a reployer, or when you climbed all the way up into the ceiling, way, way, way into the top of the space station where normally you would never be able to go, but we thought it'd be a cool idea to let you go there.
There was
a
lot of weird things
so
that came out of the being able to mimic. We had one problem where mimics, when they were swapping into the thing that they wanted to become, they had a bug one time where they just kept creating that same object over and over again. Somewhere in my archives, I've got some old video of like 1 million trash cans just slowly spreading across the entire lobby of the space station.
That's a bit.
At
Where's
one
the
point,
footage?
mimics could turn into,
That sounds great.
because they had access to the assets somehow, but like they could turn into T-pose models of Morgan. So you would just see like a freakish Morgan, like, "Merp." Yeah, it was bad.
You just mentioned the phantoms, having lights where phantoms walk and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, like we'd have to go in and we would choose to add a few more fixtures just so that, to really add the drama to them walking through this space.
One of the key tells with the phantoms is the fact that they disrupt all the electrical signals around them. So you can be on one floor and tell there's a phantom below you because the lights start to begin to flicker and
It's
begin
such
to
a
short
cool
out and act
detail.
weird. And that was one of the big benefits of having a dynamic lighting system. One of the things that they wanted for Prey was to have dynamic lighting. It's one of those things that we don't really push in your face and scream at you to look at this, but you can stand in lobby and just watch the sun go around the station and just watch the shadows sweep through the entire lobby and sweep through all the spaces. If you stay there long enough, the systems are set up so that like nighttime lighting will begin to flicker on all over the station, and you can just watch that day-night transition. That was one of the big things that we got, was just having a rendering system that wasn't relying on light maps, because that was just a much better fit for what they wanted for the environment for Prey.
God,
there's a couple of things that were like really big efforts in the game, right? Like the looking glass rendering feature, the mimic ability, and like the glue gun was another really big one. It was like a tremendous amount of game design and engineering and art effort by the team. And we had lots of different incarnations of it. And part of it was like, this isn't a classic action shooter, so we don't want all of our weapons to be like machine gun, sniper rifle, rocket. And also fictionally, this is a space station, like a science research space station. It's not, there wouldn't be rocket launchers aboard the space station.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of our tools need to come from like research science background, right? That's like the narrative theming behind it. So this was like, okay, well, why does this exist? Well, it was like a tool they used to subdue the aliens, right? The Typhon. But it went through lots of incarnations, a lot of iterations. Like at one point it was more like a stream, right? And then it would make like a sticky surface. Another point it was like, almost like it fired a beanbag. like less frequently, like do, 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 and the beanbag would explode like popcorn. And then eventually,
that's cool.
Actually, we settled on what we have now, which is kind of like a stream, like a fast-moving stream of balls that all merge together into big gloopy structures. You know, there were some concessions we had to make because for scope and because of the technology we're using, we're like, you know, initially we had like, you could make bridges across gaps. And we could have probably eventually figured that out, but we had to cut it off eventually, you know. Going down that path was not performing well and it had way too many bugs. And so we settled on like, well, you can stick it to surfaces, but you can't build like 3D shapes out of it.
The glue gun was tough because it was foam that turned into a hardened substance, so it needed to both be this thing that could suppress movement on the AI that was fluid, but then also could turn into a hard walkable surface, but also could be shattered and destroyed and removed out of the game. And it was just this kind of compounding, like, any one of these things would be difficult enough, but let's combine 5 of them. And yet, the thing is, and what helps the producers not lose our minds when things like this land in our lap, is that the glue gun ultimately became one of the coolest things in Prey. And, you know, we can't deny it worked out in the end, even if we all pulled out a lot of our hair trying to get it there. Because of the devotion that we have to simulation and the play your own way mentality, it leads to a lot of extra work, for one thing, that's never intended. And sometimes because we put something in the game and it seems like a really cool idea and production's all on board with it, yeah, that seems like a really great idea, but then it spawns something else that is also an incredibly cool idea, but that we hadn't even considered trying to find time in the schedule to support. But we all want it. So there's a lot of shell game shuffling around that goes on in production at Arcane.
That was the most beautiful conversation I've ever heard about this. Mike, that's so cool. So they had different iterations of the glue gun. By the way, the absolute coolest weapon in that game. The Q-beam feels cool to use, right? But the glue gun, that's like iconic. Because it's non-lethal, but it is purely mechanical. And yeah, the way she said it, right? They have to have, as she was describing it, I'm trying to imagine the process of like how they'd have to make it. And so it shoots a globule, right? That it hits the wall, turns into, you know, expands out, creates a solid walking surface, right? But when you shoot the enemies with it, it has to, it like wraps around them. It's like goopy. And then...
So it needed to both be this thing that could suppress movement on the AI that was fluid, but then also could turn into a hard walkable surface, but also could be shattered and destroyed and removed out of the game.
It needs to do all these things and try to actually program it to do that, I think it was crazy. But they goddamn did it. And just the idea that you can use this thing to climb, create walkways like this, which is shown at the beginning of the game, right? Gets you thinking of like what you could do. If you could make 3D objects, this game would be crazy. That would have been Prey 2. Prey 2 would have been insane with what they probably could have done. But
3D on like, well, you can stick a path was not.
I love the glue gun so much. It's so good. The fact that she's like, it creates so much extra work, but that process ends up resulting in something that's even better, even cooler than you would have planned, that you were even planning, right? A lot of shell game shuffling around.
Shuffling around that goes on in production at Arcane. I think because that is so inherent in our DNA and how we make our games, we tend to do impossible things. The joke that I had leading into this game with Ricardo and Harvey was like, okay, for the next game, let's just choose one impossible thing that we're gonna do instead of like 5, like we did last time, where we got this idea and it seemed amazing and cool, and we implemented it and it still seemed amazing and cool, and then we hit something, but we're so in love with the idea of it being in the game that we're like determined to actually make it work.
That makes me feel so sad for them. Like these developers, this team that was part of Arcane Austin. The phrase like, "Oh, for our next game, let's do this." Like, think about all these things, and they were having a blast making this shit, and by the end, they were so pleased. They were like, "Hell yeah, we did it! We did this!" Right before, obviously, any of the sales numbers and everything, it was just the satisfaction of completion, and the fact that you'd be like, "Oh man, like where are we gonna take next?" And now, never know.
Before it was the glue gun, it was the amber gun for a little while, because the stuff that it shot out was supposed to solidify
like
into
amber.
So it went through many revisions on what its capabilities were and what the design approach was, just based on what we could figure out what it could possibly
I wonder why
do.
amber.
We had cases where you could shoot the glue gun, and before the foam kind of solidified, project yourself through the environment.
Oh, right.
Even after the game had gone live, players had found an exploit that we had to fix where you could do that.
Yeah.
And I think some speedrunners still use it, like they use like the earlier version of the game in order to like speed run through the game using that exploit.
There's a locked office that you're not supposed to be able to get into in the demo. It doesn't break anything if you get into it, but like somebody, the window has like these slats, and somebody shot the glue gun through the slat. So there was a pile of glue in the office, and then they got the Nerf gun and shot a bullet, bounced it off the glue ball, and it hit the button that's on the back of the door that you're not supposed to be able to access, and then the door opened, and we were just like,
what? That is insane. Who figures this out? That is insane. He shot glue into there. He then ricocheted a dart off of that to hit the button by the door. And it worked, because obviously it's like a fully functioning section. It's just in the demo, but it is fully functional. This is what. Never underestimate people that play these games. Or games they're gonna find ways, and they always do. And this is beautiful. This is goddamn amazing.
whoa. Like how many shots did that take, for that person to pull that off? But they did it.
Masterful.
You do like cycle testing, so you write test plans that focus on certain elements, like you mentioned, maybe NPC types, and then you go through like a test suite that focuses on that. And so you do that cycle testing over the project course. So you'll go through all of your powers, you'll go through all of your NPC types, environment, etc. But then there's also testers that get to do more of the creative testing as well. So then they take combinations and kind of do like out-of-the-box testing as well. So it's kind of like scheduling different people to do different types of testing in order to try to cover as much as you can, because it's impossible to cover every single scenario.
Josh, an engineer, and I were talking down at the food truck one day, and one of us suggested, like, wouldn't it be cool if the darts could actually interact with those screens? I think Josh worked on it for a couple hours or something, and he had it working, and we showed it to Ricardo, and it was like, that was it. It was in the game. That was a new feature that that we could work on. And that, I think Arcane is special in that way, where, because it is this systems-driven game, because we always try and find multiple solutions to problems, it allows for, that creative freedom to, for someone to just come up with an idea and try it out. And then it's, a feature that, like, there's just some puzzles, some rooms that are hard to get into unless you have the toy gun, and you shoot it at the computer screen to unlock a door or something.
And then you're...
This was a conversation had at a food truck outside, and was like, hey, this would be neat. They put it together, made it work, showed it off. They were like, yeah, put it in the game. Put it in the game is great. I love the mindset. These guys were great. What the fuck? That's so cool. The idea that that could work with the screens is so cool. And there were a couple, like the one scene that they did show. This scene,
and he had it working.
You have to use the Darga to get into that room, right? And I think that's so cool. But it's optional to do it for other rooms. There's other doors. Like there are some offices like you can see the buttons. Any of the door buttons or the screens, you can completely interact with it with this guy. It's such a small detail. Right? But the fact that the heads of the darts interact. I don't know. I just find that so cool. They come up with these ideas, and the actual higher ups were like, "Yeah, that's a cool idea. Let's do that." Neat. And I'm sure that happens in a lot of game development, right? Like it's not completely 100% everything's pre-designed, pre-thought out, not designed, but like thought out what we're going to include, and then people bring up other ideas and they're like, no, never mind. Right? I'm sure there's tons of games that come up with really interesting things along development that are taken in, but it's cool when you see it, right? Especially when it's a cool feature that you actually, that's neat. And it's not crazy. This isn't like game breaking. This isn't like huge revolutionary, but it's a cool little detail that they added in.
Just come up with an idea and try it out. And then it's, a feature that, like, there are just some puzzles, some rooms that are hard to get into unless you have the toy gun, and you shoot it at the computer screen to unlock a door or something.
And then your team has to shoot a dart at every screen in the game.
Absolutely, and then try to find cases where potentially that's not the best scenario that we hadn't accounted for, so that you're not getting early access to something that you're not supposed to.
You're welcome.
It's his fault. That's amazing.
Yeah, so one of the best things about Prey for me was that I was not involved in it at all, which means that somebody was making exactly the kind of game that I love, but I didn't know anything about it. I couldn't see behind the curtain. And so once in a while, we would hear something, or we would video conference each other for an hour or two at a time and just sit in a conference room and talk. And so he would explain something that they were fighting about on Prey, or a direction they were going, or I'd see a screenshot or whatever. But it was really when I finished Dishonored 2, we were halfway through Death of the Outsider, and I thought it was going in a direction where I could leave, and for the second half of that project, those guys did brilliantly. I came back halfway through, and I was the remote team member at that point, after 4 years in France. And so I got to sit down and just play Prey every day and give them my general impressions and what excited me and what I tried and what didn't work. And it was an amazing experience. I think I did 2 full playthroughs right when I got back, when the game got to a good place for that. And it was just like, for me, it was like, guys, this is my game of the year. I didn't have anything to do with it, so I can say that. It was truly special, kind of an homage to System Shock, and but unique moments in its own right. Being able to go out in space and being able to unlock all the different levels and then travel freely. The glue cannon is amazing. The recycler grenade and that whole system for breaking things down into component pieces and reconstituting them was a great game, in my opinion. And Moon Crash is even more innovative, and that's what we had the team working on as a DLC to Prey while we were spinning up the new thing that we're working on. But so I didn't have anything to do with Prey except to enjoy it.
That's got to be such a cool feeling, right? Like, I know him say like, "Oh, I didn't have anything to do with it, and that's why it was a good game," right? It's the idea that he comes in to the project, and he just gets to play. He plays it. He plays what they already worked on, right? So it's not about like, oh, figuring out where to go, what to do. He actually gets to like play the product and feel it out, what works, what doesn't, and everything. And at the end, you see what they've made, what they put together. And the fact that he did 2 full playthroughs, probably because he it's part of his process. But I mean, sounded like he had a good time. And I don't know, that's gonna be so cool to come onto the team, and then one of your first things to do is to play the project that they've made. Instead of being part of the process of making it, you're now essentially, at the end of it, testing it out, feedback. Right? And then obviously they can iterate from there if they need to, but it's fascinating. And Moon Crash, my God, I hope they talk about Moon Crash, even like slightly in this. Because that took everything the base game did, like mechanically, and they did more, more innovation. Right? It's obviously a very different game from the base game, but everything that it feels feels exactly like Prey. In the best way.
If you think Prey is a tough game to explain to somebody, then you should try Elevator Pitch its breakthrough DLC, Moon Crash, a roguelike twist on the immersive sim genre where you play as a different character attempting to escape a base on the moon, each character having unique traits that help the next character escape faster.
It's funny because they actually are now pivoting into Moon Crash. It's hilarious. I didn't realize that. But no, I'll say, okay, just real quick before they get into it. My impressions of Moon Crash were so strange because I had the DLC and I had no idea what point this DLC was going to take place, before or after the main game, what it was going to include, right? When you go read the description, when you go to start a new game, it clicked. It's like, oh, this is a roguelike. This is a roguelike. And I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that. That feels strange for this game, especially coming off of the story. I was like, so we're just going to do different runs. Things are going to be different, and we try to do certain objectives, and then we have to repeat, but things are going to be different every time. It's like, okay, well, is there going to be like progress, sustainability? Is there even going to be a story? Is this just, sandbox roguelike Prey? Where's it going to go? Stuff like that. Initial impressions, I was optimistic, interested, but I thought the roguelike made it feel a little strange, but it is not a roguelike in the way that you would think a roguelike is. Right? At least what any other roguelike games that actually are roguelikes, this doesn't feel like that at all. Doesn't feel like that. And it was wonderful.
It's nothing short of terrific, but being a DLC for a game that's sold modestly and a lot of its consumers didn't actually complete, it's flown tragically under the radar for years.
Tragic is the word.
After we finished Prey, we had a little internal game jam with the teams. We took a couple of weeks and we just said, like, hey, put yourself into groups and come up with ideas. Take what we built, take the tool set, and come up with some new and crazy ideas and see what happens.
That's
and
so cool.
There were a number of things in Moon Crash that actually resulted from internal game jam ideas that people came up with. It's
That's
an opportunity
awesome.
to try things that are a little different. And when you finish a game after years and years of developing a game, you want the team to have motivation and not, okay, let's keep doing the same thing that we've been doing for the last 4 years of our lives. Like, you kind of want to do a little bit of a twist to that because we're tired at that point. It takes a lot out of you at the very end.
And Moon Crash was probably one of the most fun projects ever for me personally, because one of the things we like to do with DLC is like experiment a little bit, right? And so we did that with some of the Knife of Dunwall and Brigmore Witches stuff, but we went even further with Moon Crash because like a bunch of us on the team are fans of roguelikes. Things like Dead Cells and Rogue Legacy and dozens of really great roguelikes. Spelunky, I can appreciate those type of games, but I'm not very good at them, and so they frustrate me because, I'm like, I started all the way over. So I like games that have a meta progression layer to them.
So a lot of it was
Interesting.
scope. We had a very sort of tight window to do something, but we wanted to do something kind of experimental and interesting because it was a relatively low risk project, so we could kind of flex a bit and see what we wanted to do. And so the roguelike thing came up very early on, and we kind of it just persisted, and so we decided to go with that.
And we had a bunch of game features in Prey originally that were cut, as always is the case in game development. Like dynamic hazards. You know, we wanted the space station to mutate even more as you play through the game, but we just didn't have time to do all that stuff.
They were gonna have the dynamic conditions actually in the base game. That would have been insane. That would have been crazy. I'd have to think about it. Not that it would be bad. I think that would add such a layer of chaos, right? But the fact that they got to bring it in for Moon Crash, they're like, oh yeah, that thing we're gonna do. So let's resurrect some stuff we cut.
But a lot of those ideas still existed, and we were like, let's make a roguelike version of this game, and let's bring back some of those things that we were interested in. But then we had to figure out like a narrative framework to hold all of that wasn't just like a meta, like you're just playing the game again, you know? So we came up with the conceit of like the Chasma spy who was like, you know, orbiting the moon and spying on the moon base. You're a hacker who has all this data that allows him to create a simulation of a moon base of events that actually transpired, and you get to live inside that simulation and play out different possibilities. The more successful you are while you're in the simulation at collecting bits of information and unlocking things, the more simulation spaces open up, right? So the more characters get unlocked, the more levels you can visit, and the more abilities you have access to, until eventually everything is opened up and you've figured out all the secrets, right? You've unlocked every character, you know what happened to every single one of them. But then on top of all of that, there's a story of you, the hacker, in the satellite, and why you're hacking into the moon base in the first place, and what your fate is, and then you get to play that out too.
I'm very happy
Remember
there
how
was
I was
that
like
plot line.
talking about how on Prey, like I think we had too many powers? Moon Crash provided, I think, an elegant solution to that because it took the powers and allowed us to break them down into more manageable pieces for players to deal with, right? So like the so-called janitor had this subset of the powers, and so she felt very distinct from the engineer character who had this other subset of power. And even though that was a subset, there was still some variation in play in there. Yeah, so each one of those represented a different way to play the game, but also a different narrative arc. It's hard to say that anything is unique because something, you know, there's always some precursor you can point to that, well, that was kind of like that. But it is the first time in my experience that I've seen a video game where, or a roguelike specifically, where like, since you're running through the same simulation with multiple heroes, multiple characters, like what the first character did impacts what the second character did. And I think that was a pretty cool feature. Until you learn that, you can end up screwing yourself. But once you know that, you can make some pretty cool strategies. You know, you can go, I want to come through with the hacker first and hack all the doors open and shut things down so that when the hacker dies and the soldier has to come through, they can, you know, breeze through this part of the game.
Exactly. That's what made it so cool. Once you unlocked everybody, and you've kind of gone around a number of times at that point, so you see certain doors that need to be repaired, certain doors that need to be hacked, computer consoles you can get into, right? Obviously some need logins, but then, you know, you have a character that can hack, so you know, oh, I could hack all these consoles, hack all these doors, so we don't need codes or anything. And then, you know, obviously when they die or you complete, you know, their escape and all that, then you come in with the engineer repairs a bunch of the doorways, so you have access to a number of these other areas, but you can go into the rooms that the hacker opened as, you know, the next character or the next character, and then, you know, you repair a number of the doorways or turrets, right? Even if you don't need the turret yourself, you repair a bunch of them so that the next characters can use those turrets. And it comes up with these strategies like, okay, this is the way you want to go. You want to go with these characters first, these ones. How do you want to do it? It's that freedom, you know, that the main game kind of provides, but this in a different way and more of it. And yeah, the fact that the roguelike nature is really just the items being in different places, the enemies being in different places, and the fact that your characters affect what character you run through, what they do has a lasting effect for the following characters. And it's super cool. I say cool a lot. But if it wasn't cool, I wouldn't say it. And him saying this, right? The powers in this one were a little bit more manageable, being broken down into essentially kind of classes in a way, right? Where certain characters have certain abilities, weapons. You could obviously purchase weapons and stuff for everybody, right? But as far as like the abilities that they have access to being unique to each of them made your strategy feel a lot cooler, right? Had to think about things a little bit different, approach differently. You know, and you weren't overwhelmed with one character having like 40 choices, you know, or every single character having all of the same powers. You know, they all felt different. I don't know. I love Moon Crash. It was so good. Sorry, I had to go off for a second.
You could replay it a lot with different playstyles, and so that goes into that sort of pushing people just outside of their comfort zone. So we took the uber set of Morgan powers and carved them off into different little branches, catering to different sort of specific playstyles. So this is the hacker person, this is the sneaky person, this is the combat, person or whatever. And then rolling that into this sort of repeating sort of framework where you can experiment over and over again.
Obviously, we wanted to do some reuse, and by it being a TranStar facility, that was kind of like a narrative way to be able to use some of it. But we also wanted, one thing about Arcane that's I really love is that we come up with a history for things. So, that we backed up, even though you don't see it in the game, we came up with a history and how the moon base was established and, the first people that got there and how it developed, and then when TranStar came over.
When you're making a new IP in particular, and you're trying to find out everything at the same time that you're building it, that could be very stressful. By the time you get around to the DLC, yes, you know what all the bits and pieces can do, and there's fun in reconfiguring them in new and unique ways that you didn't get to try the first time.
Yep. It's familiar, but different.
If it wasn't obvious enough, I really love Prey, and if you've gotten this far and never completed it, then this is probably the right time to stop and give it a go. Because while Prey didn't set the world on fire, or win many awards, or change gaming forever, you may be one of the people who consider it a modern classic. And another reason is that we're just about to spoil the ending. You've been warned.
Here we go.
I'm pretty proud of how well the narrative story we were telling meshed with the game that you were playing. You know what I mean? It was pretty well meshed together, and even the controversial ending scene, which was a Hail Mary at the very end.
Was it? Why was it controversial?
The whole game. This is a spoiler, so turn your ears off if you don't want to know this. But the entire game was a kind of simulation, but it wasn't the kind that's it's all a dream, that it's meaningless. It actually mattered because the whole point was they were trying to figure out how to bridge the gap between humanity and this new alien species, and you realize, oh my God, I was one of these things the whole time. And I think some people had a negative reaction because, to them it felt like nothing I did mattered, But I think it mattered very much so, and I loved the idea of all the people kind of judging you. The game is about empathy, right? At least that's my take.
That ending, after it happened and we finished the game. Right, we talked about it for a little bit. I 100% saw that ending was probably how a lot of people were going to take it. Sort of it was all a dream. Like literally what he said. It was all a dream. None of it actually mattered because it was all just made up. Right? But that's not really true. Right? Your actions didn't physically result in something actually happening out in a tangible effect, right, in a direct way, but it was the idea that you were being watched and your choices along the entire game were then taken into account because you're a Typhon hybrid kind of situation, right? And it's cool because one, they're not only trying to see how you, as, you know, this creature, really think and act, right? But, you know, based on like sympathy or how aggressive you were, how many powers you were trying to get, like how many neuromods you used, like how you approach certain situations, how many, you know, did you try to save people? Did you kill a lot of people? All stuff like that. But at the same time, it was also about them trying to figure out how, like, everything went to shit for Earth at the end, right? We don't really know a ton of details, but Alex shows us the pictures and is not good. And this is all based on Morgan's memories, which I think is one of the big saving graces for being like, oh, it's all a dream. It's like, this is all stuff that really happened. This is all stuff that really happened, and you're kind of reliving it, right? And you're able to make certain choices, but at the end of the day, this is all based on real events that happened to Morgan, right? Because these are Morgan's memories that we're experiencing. And this is all in an effort to try to figure out, you know, like you said, bridging the gap between Typhon and humanity. Can Typhon feel, you know, empathy? Because without Morgan's idea for the experiment, right, on the Typhon, you know, sort of like the reverse of the neuromods, right? Instead of putting Typhon inside humans, can we put human inside a Typhon? That kind of a thing, right, with the mind. And it's without that, like you look at the mimics, you look at the phantoms, they don't have empathy. They do not have it. Right? So that's why they seem very like cold and soulless in a way. They're just killers. Or they're just killing. Right? They have a goal, they have a purpose in existing, but they can't empathize with humanity. And so Morgan's idea was essentially what this game's plot was, and we were experiencing it. We were actually the main thing of it. And so it doesn't feel, it can initially, if you don't really think about it, it could feel like, oh yeah, okay, it was all a dream, it didn't really matter. But when you look at all the pieces of why and what, it's like, no, this is actually huge. Well, huge. And the, you know, the judgment at the end is actually kind of cool. What a cool little detail, right?
So like the game at the end is just all the people are like, how did you treat, like actually the most important thing was how did you treat all the people that you met along the way, you know? It's the trolley problem, is the game, you know? Yeah.
That's one of the things that I called it. It's serious, like it's
and
like
you know the reviews back then were actually a little mixed as well, which maybe was part of the problem, you know. And it's so hard. This is a very hard world. It's a rough world where people spend 3-4 years on something, pour all their passion, they make it. Frankly, I mean, we see the result. Prey's a great game, except that when it ships, you might have some bugs. And that's it. All it takes is one angry journalist. Sorry, not pointing fingers, of course. And they give you a 4 out of 10 after having said, "Oh, I enjoyed this game so much for 30 hours," and then there was this crash that could not allow me to keep playing. 4 out of 10. That hurts.
Who the fuck gave this a 4 out of 10? Like I could be like, okay, like a 7, 8, right? I think a 10 out of 10 would be impressive, but I think I get 4. Who the fuck gave this a 4? And based on what he's saying, so the review, I'm gonna find this review. I'm gonna find this review. What the hell? So it's like, oh, the game was fun, and then there was a crash, and so now there's no way.
Could not allow me to keep playing. 4 out of 10. That hurts.
Prey afforded the Austin side of Arcane to like come into its own, and like we've built a whole team and a whole culture over here, because on Dishonored we were We had all that, but we were smaller. We were like 20 people at max, right? Prey afforded us an opportunity to grow the team, grow our own culture here, and do something on our own.
There's this shared ideal for games, and that design philosophy that is integral to arcane games that makes it an exciting place to work. You have all these systems that are interacting. You end up talking to a lot of people that you might not talk to in an environment where your responsibilities are a lot more specialized.
For me, I think it's like the family feeling that I get from all of my fellow coworkers. I think that Arcane is a very tight-knit group and we all get along very well, and it kind of fosters that collaborative environment.
We were
God,
also
this is
building
fucking
the team
tragic.
in Austin back then, so it's been very hard. And there's been some hiccups on the way, but ultimately everybody was very collaborative and they did their best, and it worked out, and that's what matters. It's a lot of miracles back to back to make a game that is decent. Because it's such a big game, we're talking AAA budgets, and it's hard to make a game with so much integrity and so much risks at that kind of budget. There's been a lot of improvisation, there's been a lot of risks that were taken and tried them and until the end, frankly. And the result is very, very close to something that I mean, I would love to play that game if it was not something that I worked on, right? It was not such a great commercial success. Why? I don't know.
There's a name for this, a game that
like physically makes me feel so unwell. And he's so sad, man. Like that, the fact that he's, because obviously like, you work on it, right? You've spent so much time building this, making it, talking about it, working with the team. And so when it's finally done, it's not about like, you don't want to play the game because you don't like it. You don't want to play it because you're like, I know this inside and out. Like you lived it, right? And so to say like, to know that you've made something that if you weren't a part of making it, you would love to play it. And you're so proud of what you and the team have actually made. It was not such a great commercial success. That right there, that expression. And I'm sorry, like the way he talks, it's like it hurts. It sucks.
I'd love to play that game if it was not something that I worked on, right? It was not such a great commercial success. Why? I don't know.
there's a name for this, a game that people really love, keep talking about for years. Maybe didn't sell that much. I think they're called cult classics, right? I think you made one of those.
That's right. Yeah, and I'm fine with that. I'll take that. As a kid, I just wanted to make those. I wanted to make those games.
Anytime we take a new effort, we try to remain true to like our core spiritual values, right? Like we believe in building super deep, interesting worlds, and we believe in giving players like the ability to be creative and improvise, and own the play experience as much as possible. Those are like our two tenets. But so we try to be true to that always, but we also want to do some new things, right? So Moon Crash is evidence of that, right? We're like, let's put some roguelike into this stew and see what happens. And so looking to the future, that's our plan.
Awesome. Can't wait to play whatever it is.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Oh my God. Jesus. 5,716 people. Alright, it's part where I enjoyed the community fund. Alright, so I'd include all this info in the description so that you guys can go support the video, check it out, all the good things. God damn. This was amazing. This was like bittersweet, but so good at the same time. Honestly, these guys making this documentary excellent. Like, thank God you guys did incredible work. Shit. It's like getting that insight into like the developers, right? Like how they were thinking about, you know, all the little things, like not just like the weapons, but like what weapons they would use on a space station, right? Like realistically. And then, you know, the Typhon abilities being considered for, okay, the players are going to get these abilities, so we got to make sure that the enemies have those same, whatever ability they have, the players should also be able to get some kind of form of, so we can't make them do, you know, crazy things, because then the player would have to do that. It's like, okay, then we got to make that. How does that work, right? The fact that just the mimic ability for the player, being able to turn into small every object pretty much, right? Virtually any object. It's not tied down, right? And there's not a lot of objects that are tied down, right? Or bolted into the wall. The fact that they had to do so much extra work in the art team. So like she said, just having to render the underside of a table, right? Because if you don't go under the table, there's no reason to. You save the art time, you save the render time, you save, you know, money, and you know that. But now you can turn into a piece of paper and roll under the desk, roll under, you know, the building, the chairs, right? So now it's like, okay, well now we got to make all this extra work, but it was worth it. It was worth it, you know, and just like the story was really good, right? But the size of the station, the scale of the outside being what it is, because from a distance, you know, I mean, that was about as realistic as you could get, right? When you're some distance away from the station, it looks smaller, right? It looks smaller just based on physics, right? And you know, farther objects away look smaller. It does. But when you get right up on the station, it's massive. It's huge. It's huge, right? And the fact that you can go outside the station, fly around the entire perimeter with no loading screens, but you can go from top to bottom, the entire thing, seamlessly. And you can enter virtually every area from the outside to an extent, right? And I love this game. If it wasn't obvious, I would just spend an hour and a half making a video, if not longer, right? I've talked a lot, but we spent this entire video talking about Prey, a game that is essentially a flop. It did not succeed, right? But this shit's special, right? Now there's a couple things. There's like two other things we're gonna do in this video, so hang on tight. But I want to propose to you a question. I want to ask in the comments: do you think, genuinely, in today's age, in the year of our Lord 2025, do you think Prey would succeed if this game, everything that it is, if that came out today? Do you think in today's climate, as far as like the games and what's popular, what people are playing, do you think this would succeed now, or do you think the result would be the same? Found it. I can't believe it. I'm kind of both shocked and not shocked at the same time. This was not searchable on YouTube. I had to go to Google and I had to like hunt this thing down. It's the old version of their review. It's on IGN's channel, and it's reviewed by IGN Canada. I want to specify that, right? This is done by Dan Stapleton, not... So it doesn't reflect the overall... Right, because there's like IGN Spain that gave it a 9, right? 9 out of 10. And so Dan gave it a 4 out of 10. And I'm kind of curious why. This is a 2-minute, 49-second review. And we're going to check it. Because I gotta know. Why, Dan? Why did you do this?
I apologize, Morgan. We're having some trouble with the equipment.
My experience with Prey...
I want to say, I'll try to be objective. I'm not going to just shit on just because he gave it a 4 out of 10 and I believe it's better than that. I will take his criticisms and I will be objective. It's fair. I think it's the right thing to do. But I'm just curious what they actually are.
I apologize, Morgan. We're having some trouble with the equipment.
My experience with Prey on PC started out promising, but after 40 hours in this atmospheric first-person RPG, it's descended into a literally unplayable technical nightmare. Due to repeated save game corruption, I've been unable to complete the campaign. This issue might not affect everybody, but I can't recommend that you take the chance, even though I like a lot of what Prey does when it works.
This is gonna be like, oh hey, there's this bad glitch, 4 out of 10. Like, I can understand, that's bullshit. Like, that sucks, right? And obviously they were clearly aware of it and working on to fix it, but that, launching, if this is the launch copy, if this is an issue, like, I can see that's a big deal, but Prey, really? Is it actually?
The first hours of Prey are enticing, with a mind-bending psychological opening that foreshadows a story more interesting than what the main plot ends up being. However, as I roamed the enormous and fascinatingly anachronistic space station, I came across countless small stories. Between emails, audio logs, and thoughtful environmental storytelling, developer Arcane did a fantastic job of making this bizarre place feel lived in long before I ever met another living human. And the surprising mobility you get made me want to turn over every metaphorical rock, which is devious, because some of those objects are actually disguised aliens who will surprise you and try to eat your face. Those jump scares get old after a while, but they were extremely effective at making me paranoid. Prey follows closely in the footsteps of classic first-person RPGs like System Shock 2 and Deus Ex, and puts some of their best ideas to good use. There's complex character development and flexible, semi-open world level design that allows you to reach objectives by different paths depending on your strengths. It sends you back and forth across the same moderately varied zones repeatedly, but often you'll have unlocked a new ability that will let you access new nooks and crannies, which keeps them interesting. All that detail goes a long way to compensate for the fact that Prey isn't the best looking game out there by a long shot. Its biggest weakness is combat. Fighting aliens and robots is fine, but their AI isn't reactive or curious seeming enough to make them fun to mess with. For instance, you would think the ability to turn into any object would let you play hilarious pranks on enemies, but most of the time the joke falls flat because monsters don't act confused by moving pieces of garbage. They just want to kill it like they do with everything else. I did have
What? Bruh, wait. Stop. Wait. Is that like a legit criticism? Because the enemies aren't curious enough to come check
object curious seeming enough to make them fun to mess with.
They're not curious enough to make them fun to mess with. So because you can't, give them a oh gotcha goof moment by turning some garbage and they come over to like sniff at it and then you spring out and shotgun them. It would be neat, but the lack of that is not, I don't think it's that serious. Like, what the fuck? But also, let's be real. If they were people or Typhon, if a Typhon sees like an object bumping around, 9 times out of 10, they're probably going to just look at it and be like, that's a mimic. Like, there's no reason for them to be like, yeah, let me go attack this thing that I know is probably one of us, right? Now, again, when you really think into that, it doesn't really super work because they're all connected mentally. But the idea is what they would either know or not know. There wouldn't really be like a curiosity thing. Just based on the lore, it wouldn't work. And then for people, like half that would just see like a random chair in a room. They wouldn't go like, oh, why is there 7 chairs in this room? That's weird. Why is this one chair like 4 feet from any desk surface? That doesn't make any sense. I'm gonna go investigate that chair. Or a banana peel on the floor, or like a weird roll of toilet paper in the middle of the the arboretum garden. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna go into that much, but that's a little silly. It's a little silly, Dan.
For instance, you would think the ability to turn into any object would let you play hilarious pranks on enemies, but most of the time the joke falls flat because monsters don't act confused by moving pieces of garbage.
They don't act confused because they're not thrown off by the garbage.
They just want to kill it like they do with everything else. I did have fun messing.
Yeah, that's kind of
with the innovative glue cannon, but its ability to create staircases is nowhere near as full of possibility as a portal gun or a gravity gun.
What? Yeah, it's a very straightforward gun. You could use it to disable enemies. You can use it to, incapacitate humans without hurting them. You can use it to build little ledges to jump onto and navigate. Say, oh, it's not as good as a portal gun. It's like, yeah, because that would be like mechanically very different. I don't know what a gravity gun is, but I imagine that would be you shoot it and things float or change gravity. I don't know, but that seems like a weird nitpick.
All of that came to a screeching halt when, after 34 hours, my recent saves all became corrupted, and going back hours to one that worked soon ran into a wall of constant crashes while loading new zones. Arcane provided me with a completely new save file around the same spot, but after a few more hours that save also became corrupted and crash prone. That game-ending tragedy means I have to advise strongly against playing on PC.
Oh my god, it actually is. It legitimately was based around the fact that it crashed. Brother, no. How? I'm sorry. I'm not gonna give him a lot of shit. It's been years, and I know apparently he updated the review after he got a new patch. It's now an 8 out of 10. Phenomenal how you get 4 extra points when they patched it. But I'm sorry, like crazy. 4 out of 10. And again, that does suck. I'm not giving him shit for that. That would feel like shit. If I put 30 hours into the game and then my save file got corrupted and I have to start over or start like 10 hours, 5 hours, 3 hours earlier, that would probably drive me crazy. Right? But it's wild to go and for 30 hours and then say it's really fun. It's really good. Like it feels really lived in. It's wild to say the game doesn't look that good. Now, again, is it super high fidelity? No, but the style is what matters. It's got style, right? Doesn't matter how realistic it looks. It's got that art style is fucking phenomenal. Really good. But that's not the point. The point is, he based this entire review on the fact that he had a horrible crash and a corrupted save. After praising that there are a lot of good things about the game, and then this game fix this bug is really bad, so I'm gonna go ahead and tell you don't buy this game on PC. So I'm imagining this is the review that they were talking about in the documentary. And again, not a great bug. But come on, to be like, don't. The fact that they provided him a save file from the area where he crashed and it got corrupted. That's cool, right? I don't know how, I assume you just send over the file, right? The file with the configurations. And you just put it in the folder wherever you install the game, right? And then, which I think that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool, right? You reach out, they say the file, it gets corrupted again, which is like, that sucks. But it really is. So his two criticisms are you can't prank the enemies because they're not curious enough. Like they don't look around and inspect you, they just want to kill you. It's like, yeah. That's kind of how they're designed. Like, it's not about like, oh, they're just made like that. It's quite literally how they act in the story, the lore that you have been given up to this point, and the crash. So those were the two criticisms. Fuck. And it's saying like, oh, the jump scares get old after a while. They don't get old. I think getting old is a weird way to say it. You stop getting scared by them, sure, but they still happen. You still go into a room and you still like, okay, where's the mimic? Is there one in here? Maybe, I don't know. And then one jumps out and you shoot and kill it. Shows that, shit, they're still doing it. The mimics don't stop happening. I don't know. I just think it's crazy. What a wild review.
This is nowhere near as full of possibility as a portal gun or a gravity gun.
The slander of the glue gun. I took it personally. Sorry, we're not gonna settle this for that long, but it's just like it doesn't have the same possibilities as a portal gun and a gravity gun. That's it. That's the only thing he says about the glue gun.
They just want to kill it like they do with everything else. I did have fun messing with the innovative glue cannon, but its ability to create staircases is nowhere near as full of possibility as a portal gun or a gravity gun.
If he's talking about navigating to different places, it's like, yeah, no shit, because if you use I played Portal 1. I get you shoot the portal, you shoot the other portal, you walk through and you're there. Incredible. Like, yeah. In this one, you kind of have to make the bridge. You make the staircase. Right? You'd be like, oh, it's not full of that potential. I'd say, if anything, it could be even more. Because this can go onto damn near any surface. You can create platforms with the glue sprawling, right? And you can get to areas, that you normally wouldn't be able to with the way the portal gun functions, right? Because you have to shoot two different surfaces and it's static. That's it, right? The fact that, like, I'll even give an example real quick. Right at the beginning of the game, where we first get the glue cannon in that room, and it shows you that first staircase that somebody else made. I ended up in our playthrough, which is on the channel. It is immediately told this is something you can kind of do, and so I went and I made a bridge on the wall. I made a little line that went up. I then climbed that. And then there was a chandelier next to it. I shot glue onto that and then jumped from that first glue platform to that and then turned around and jumped up to the second floor of that entry area, right? And you're not even supposed to be up there for quite a while in the game. There's no reason to be up there at this point, right? But I went up there and it was because I was messing around with that and I got the stun gun early on, like the beginning of the game, got the stun gun. And it was the best decision ever, mostly because it was super helpful. But it was the idea that you could build the platforms on several surfaces and navigate by like platforming to several surfaces. And a portal gun wouldn't let you do that. You'd say, oh, the portal gun would just let you shoot up to the second floor and then you'd get up there. Like, well, right, sure. But you'd have to be able to see it. You'd have to be able to aim for it. And then, like, let's say the portal gun would work on every single surface in the game. I don't know. It feels like you're looking for a reason to not like it. Right? I could say, oh, yeah, the portals would be cool. Sure. But being like, oh, this isn't as good as a portal gun. It doesn't have as much potential as a portal gun or the gravity gun. I don't know. It just feels weird, man. Feels weird. The save thing does suck.
For a few more hours, that save also became corrupted and crash prone. That game-ending tragedy means I have to advise strongly against playing on PC. Bethesda says it's hopeful for a fix soon, but there are no guarantees. Stay tuned to IGN for a full review of the console version soon. In the meantime, check out our graphics comparison, the first 11 minutes, and everything you need to know about Prey.
Good God. I can't possibly imagine this is a cause of why Prey didn't succeed. But I imagine at the time, this was like what, 8 years ago? I'm sure you see it, like the average person sees a review 4 out of 10, you're like, oh man, fuck that game. You don't even look at the review, you just see the number and you're like, nah, never mind. Ugh, rough. Right? And the title of it. Absolutely wild. To go and basically say, yeah, it might not even work. Or imply that it's not gonna work. And then to be like, on PC, okay, all right. It might be good on console. It might get an 8 out of 10 on console from me, but on PC, it's a 4 out of 10. And I get you got to include like the issues, but wild, nuts. Well, let me know. What do you guys put Prey out of 10? What do you think? Right? Obviously, if you're a fan, you might be biased, but realistically, I just feel like 4 out of 10 is nuts. That's crazy business. Crazy business. So we're gonna go. We've been here for like 2.5 hours almost. It's been a hell of a time. So we're gonna end the video here. Go and look out for more stuff that would be interesting to see. But I wanted to do this because we finished Prey Moon Crash recently, and I think that the base game and Moon Crash are absolutely phenomenal, incredibly underrated, and like it. I'm so glad that a number of people, both recently, this year, prior year, and several years ago, have brought up multiple times that we need to pray. We need to pray this game, right? And we did, and I fucking love it. It's so good. It's so fun. It really is. I'd recommend everybody play it, right? If you like that kind of sandboxy, right? You don't necessarily. I'd say if you're not a fan of like, it's not like Call of Duty FPS, right? It's like it literally feels like BioShock. And now that we're playing Deus Ex currently, still haven't finished it, right? We're still we're kind of like in the middle ish, I guess, of things that are happening. But I definitely feel the Deus Ex influence now, and like BioShocky. I think that's great. And if you like either of those games, I feel like you'd like Prey. But man, so anyway, probably some more cool videos out there. I'm sure there's some from these guys. I will go ahead and link the main documentary in the comments. You guys want to check it out on your own, see what's going on. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks for hanging out for as long as this was. It's been a good time. It's been fun. What a throwback. So, well, thanks for stopping by. See you guys in the next video, whatever that ends up being. Bye-bye.